Top of the sixth, and rookie sensation Ricky Vaughn on the pitch now. You can close the book on Kellner.
Thank God.
Relax, Ricky. We're only 4 runs down. We're still in this game.
You take it to him?
Oh, all right.
Look, man, guy gets a second, first sign indicator.
Vaughn, a juvenile delinquent in the offseason in his major league debut.
I'm gonna light your ass up, me.
Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
Hey, Dukes here with a digression episode of Upper Middlebrow. In honor of the start of the baseball season, we're talking about our favorite baseball movies, and we're joined by Jason Herbert. Jason is an American historian, and as you'll hear, he currently lives in Colorado, but his heart is in Florida. I can relate to it. Jason is also the host of the Historians at the Movies podcast, which is excellent. You should check it out. I will recommend the Gangs of New York episode in which Jason is joined by historian Tyler Anbinder. Tyler tells a fascinating story about advising Martin Scorsese and another fascinating story about the great environmental historian William Cronin. Jason also coordinates the Historians at the Movies watch parties, which are usually on Sunday nights, and you can learn about those by following the hashtag HATM on Twitter. Anyway, let's get right into our conversation with Jason. It was super fun, nerdy, nostalgic. Before warming to our subject, we were talking about missing the ocean and seafood, and, well, you will hear. Let's just get into it.
We got Florida spiny lobster, which is outstanding. You throw that on a grill, it's really good.
And stone crabs.
Joe stone crabs. Oh, stone crabs are so good. Like again, if you like I'm here in Colorado, and the closest thing to seafood I can get are like Rocky Mountain oysters, right? So
not all that close.
Oysters. So, really? Oh yeah, have you ever had them?
Yet to try it.
They're good.
Yeah, I've never had them either. Yeah,
legitimately good. Like
awesome.
If you take them and you slice them super thin, you kind of like almost like you're doing like a I forget what's the word I'm looking for, and you bread them, right, and you pan fry them, and then
schnitzels.
It's like schnitzel. I'm dead serious. Actually, it's actually like once you get your head that you're eating balls.
No, there's some German word. It's like Schnitzel, Schiepenballen, or something like that. Like Ballen, Schiepen, Schnitzel, or something like that.
Listen, we're talking about baseball tonight, right? So it's like we're talking about balls and all sorts.
We got
to
get balls in somehow.
I'm Luxembourgish, and so that's kind of like part of the cuisine that my grandmother cooked.
So why are we talking to you about baseball tonight? That we're here talking to you about.
Man, like who doesn't love baseball, right? I mean, baseball is like the American sport, right? And I know people like football and things like that, and like I'm from Kentucky, so for me, first and foremost in my life is Kentucky basketball, right? There's like my kids and Kentucky basketball, and like, yeah, my girlfriend's really high up there too. And she's like, I know that you're emotionally unavailable 2 hours on Tuesday nights and 2 hours on Saturday. And I'm like, actually, no, I'm actually far too emotionally available. That's why we can't talk right now.
Yeah. I'm raw. I'm too raw.
like this is her second basketball season we've been together, and that's how we chart our time together. But no, okay. So I'm an American historian, right? And the idea somehow of like Americana, if you will, the idea of a memory or like this imagined idea of America is so closely entwined with baseball itself. And so much I think of that is because baseball, more than any other sport, relies upon its own mythology to perpetuate itself as time moves forward. So I think that's part of the reason. I think when you become a baseball fan, you become a fan of the team and its history versus, say, the NBA. You can like a team or a guy or a WNBA or a player or tennis or anything like that. That's all fine and good. But there's a different relationship to baseball and the teams, I think, than the other sports.
That is a great answer. I love that answer.
One thing I'll add to that, Chris, is that I had been listening to Jason's podcast a few times and kind of following on Twitter, and I was like, oh, I feel like this would be a great guy to get on our show. what could we talk about? And I just had an intuition that Jason was a baseball guy. I had no evidence of that, but I was like, he's about our age, grew up around the same time, back when like baseball on TV and the radio was great.
Oh, yeah.
You know, sort of pre-steroid era. Also, a nerd, somebody who reads stuff, somebody who likes movies. I just had a feeling that you would be a baseball guy. So you know, when I reached out to you, it was a guess. I was like, hey, do you want to come and talk about baseball movies? You talk about movies. I'm guessing you like baseball, and you know.
Well, I'll talk to you guys about any kind of movies you want, or baseball of any kind of sort. You know, baseball. You know, and I'm sure we'll talk about like our favorite teams and things like that. But for me, a lot of my own personal identity is related to a very specific baseball team. And you know, I was thinking today, as we kind of prepped up for this, thinking about like, you know, what we talk about, the ideas of like, you know, because I'm from Kentucky and from Louisiana, it's not like those are baseball hotbeds. So a lot of people grow up and they're regionally associated with their baseball team, much like most people are regionally associated with their other teams and things like that. But I didn't have a regional association with any particular team. So whenever I tell people my favorite baseball team, it always kind of pisses them off. And then, you know, because they don't understand.
Yeah, I think we might be on dangerous territory here.
Yeah. I know there's a population of people who talk like that, and they are not my people. But but I'm looking forward to this.
Do we need to out ourselves as baseball fans, like who our teams are?
I think we're gonna get there eventually.
I'm sure we'll get there. And we're all friends here.
Oh yeah.
For now,
we can be enemies at the stadium, but we're friends on Upper Middleborough.
Fair enough. All right, good.
So Jason, my mom and stepdad moved to Lexington, Kentucky when I was in high school.
No kidding.
To work at the UK library. My mom actually just recently retired from Keeneland Library, the racetrack.
Sure, yeah.
I spent a lot of my summers in high school in Kentucky, and I didn't know a lot of people. So I watched a lot of WGN. And so actually, even though I grew up as an Orioles fan, because I grew up in Virginia and the Orioles were kind of like the closest team, and my earliest memories were watching like Cal Ripken, Eddie Murray in the '83 World Series. Like I have a little bit of a memory of that. But in the 90s, man, like I was sitting around my mom's house and like Harry Carey would come on WGN because everybody got WGN in Kentucky. It's a Chicago station that broadcast, across the Midwest, basically. And there's an interesting history there related to the Chicago Tribune. WGN is world's greatest newspaper. They were the network that broadcast the Scopes trial, over the radio. And it's the reason we all know about like the debate between William Jennings Bryan and Clarence Darrow. Anyway, I'm getting nerding out. But so I was sort of thought maybe you would be a Cubs fan for that reason, or a Reds fan. But I think I saw a picture of you with a certain black and white logo on a hat, if I'm not mistaken.
There may have been a black and white logo, dark blue. It's really the colors of America when you think about it. America's icon is in pinstripes, ladies and gentlemen.
So we're talking about the Detroit Tigers here, or the Chicago White Sox?
Oh, no. We're talking about Lou Gehrig. We're talking about Don Mattingly. We're talking about Dave Winfield. We're talking about Joe DiMaggio. We're talking about Mickey Mantle. We're talking about America.
If I had told Chris this prior to the taping, he would not have shown up.
I think America's history is a history of underdog status. Really.
Have you seen the Yankees lately? So.
You can probably guess where I am from by this point, based on my reactions to the team that you were alluding to. I'm going through a little bit of PTSD.
Actually, Chris, every American League East city thinks the Yankees are their rival. Like as a Baltimore Orioles fan growing up, I was convinced that we were in a deathly rivalry with the Yankees.
Yes, and you think that until you spend any time living in New York and you realize that New York doesn't think about anybody.
No,
it's
I don't even
amazing.
Like yeah,
I do love that about the Yankees, that they're like, oh, you think you're our rival? No, we're just better than you.
Isn't that cute?
I don't think about you at all. The Yankees are the Don Draper of American sport.
I saw that meme actually today. It's like, I don't think about you at all, right? And it was Whataburger and In-N-Out. And by the way, In-N-Out is absolute garbage. I'm just going to go ahead and go on the record there.
I'm with you. I agree. Overly hyped. Square the circle, though, because there are other America's teams you could have chosen as somebody with, like
for baseball.
For baseball, often it's the Braves, right? Or
were they? No, Braves get good in the mid '90s.
Yeah,
they were like Dale Murphy was good in the '80s, but they were like,
but they had TBS, so they were also a team. If you were growing up in the South, you could see on TV for free or for cheap cable, right?
But they were never America's team. Like, the closest thing we've really got to America's team is actually the Cardinals. When you want to play off of, like, aside from the Yankees, of course, right? But the Cardinals kind of have that heartlandish idea more than any other city in the country. St. Louis identifies as a baseball city alone, right? There are other sports there in St. Louis, but St. Louis is a baseball city. If you've been to St. Louis, you know this. They are all about their Cardinals there. I used to live in West Palm Beach. The Cardinals spring training is in Jupiter, which is 20 minutes north of there. So to get to go to those games, can we talk about how awesome spring training games are? I like to go to spring training more than I like to go to games. There's a majesty of spring training. It's like you're excited about it. The games are in August and it's hot on a Tuesday night, and I just want to not be there anymore because you're in the 11th inning and I have to work tomorrow. But spring training, it's awesome. We've still got a shot, and you can go to anybody's spring training. Like, the Yankees play on the opposite coast, so like I would go to cheaters. Hate the Astros. I actually have a Yankees Astros thing, but yeah. So you're talking about your teams that you could identify with. In my mind, for Americana, right? The Yankees are baseball. People don't want to admit that, except for the only time that your team sells out is when the Yankees come to town. Okay, this is the same way Alabama is in football. It's the same way Kentucky is in basketball. There are a couple other the elite teams, the blue bloods, if you will. Carolina, maybe Duke, or Carolina, Duke, and football, it's really Bama and nobody else right now. You've got Ohio State, but that dude he dyes his beard like really badly. He looks weird. I don't know. Baseball, Yankees, Dodgers, Cardinals.
And as a kid,
Cubs for a while.
Was it always the Yankees? And because of that, like,
no.
Nerdy Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio tradition, or was there a family member?
What was the inciting event? That's awesome.
My T-ball team was the Yankees. I come by it honestly. I grew up in this little town in Acadiana. If people are listening and they don't know what Acadiana is the center of Cajun culture in the United States and Louisiana. So I grew up in this little town called Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. We moved down there when I was 3 years old. So my stepdad could work on the oil rigs offshore, right? So me, my mom, my little brother, and then also my aunt and uncle. So my uncle, my dad, my stepdad worked on the oil rigs. And so my team, I just happened to be put on the Yankees. And like my lucky number to this day is the jersey number that I had when I was on that team. It's like, okay, we're the Yankees. And we ended up winning the league championship, defeating the hated Astros, the only team to beat us all year. Yours truly scored the winning run.
Very nice.
Whatever we won, right?
You'll never forget it.
No, I swear to God I won't, right? I still remember, like, I was on first base, and the kid that hits behind me always hits, and I always got out on second because he sucked. And I made it home because I just hauled ass, which is what I could do when I was tiny. So became a Yankees fan, and then over time, right, you're growing up. So I'm born in 77, right? So I would have been, at this point in time, this is like 82, 83, somewhere in that range. The Yankees aren't very good. They're kind of coming off of that brief moment in the late 70s when you've got Reggie Jackson and all that kind of stuff. They go a pretty nasty decline for a little while. So it's not like I was picking like the great team.
Yeah.
But I also remember, like, I'm in fourth grade. We had moved back up to Kentucky at this point in time, fifth grade at this point in time, having to do a book report, right? And I picked up a book, The Iron Horse. What's this? And it's Lou Gehrig, who is to this day my favorite baseball player of all time because of all this different stuff. I learned about New York. I learned about ALS. I learned about his life, all this kind of stuff. What's the school, Columbia, whatever, right? I learned about that, and of course then you've got Don Mattingly, who is Mr. Baseball, is Donnie Baseball. And the Yankees are still not any good. The Tigers are better than us in the 80s and 90s. But that became like that was going to be my team. There was no real team in Kentucky or Louisiana. This was the team I kind of fixed with. And remember, we were all trading baseball cards back in the day, right? So that was fun, right? So that just became and something about the history too is you got into it. Me and my best friend Jesse Moffin at the time, we'd trade our baseball cards and we talk about you talk about Babe Ruth. You really kind of like talk about these guys the way they talk about them in Sandlot, right? About these guys, Ruth and Gehrig and Murderers Row, and they didn't just have to be Yankees players, Roberto Clemente, Willie Mays, all these dudes. We kind of grew up at the tail end of Gen X, maybe early millennials, zennials, whatever. Kind of grew up in this last bastion of baseball as we knew it, where you had baseball cards, pre-phones, kind of stuff like that.
Box scores.
Oh my God, yeah. Score game.
Pre-fantasy,
watching Harry Carey's drunk ass on WGN, right? Yeah. I didn't know he was drunk. I just
sometimes they don't put things in the cracker
enjoyed watching the Cubs. They were also awful, right? They were never going to win. They were, Cubbies were never going to get there. So, that was kind of my team, and I still enjoy going to games. Here's a fun fact. The Yankees have never won a baseball game that I've attended in person. I've seen them in World Series. I have seen them in Chicago.
Chris, do you have any, we should move on to movies, but
go
Chris,
for it.
Do you want to react at all to Jason's confession?
Well, I want to like hire Jason to like come to all the Sox Yankees games in Boston so the Yankees never win a game in Boston ever again is what I want.
Can I give you a little confession, Chris? Here's the thing.
Of course.
So my grandfather, who was my hero in life, right, passes away a couple of years ago. And like all I want to do now is live to be 87 so I could beat him. He was 86 when he died. And I was having this discussion the other day with my mom. She's like, why do you want to, like, because I want to beat your dad. She's like, you're turning in this competition with your grandfather. I was like, yes. So anyway, long story, I researched the family history and I find out that like my ancestry, my last name is Herbert, but my maternal line is Chadwick, right? So we're very English. Yeah. My ancestors are buried all over Boston. Like,
nice.
So there's a part of me that should be a Boston Red Sox fan. My boy's mother, her late grandmother, who was a woman that I loved dearly, and still to this day, was from Dorchester Heights. She's like
Dorchester.
Grammy was like she had.
Dorchester.
And I swear to God, Chris, what she would do, Grammy, I love her to this day, right? She'd start talking about Boston. I swear to God, she would milk the accent. She'd start like forcing it out. She hadn't been in Massachusetts in 45 years, but like she like that out. So yeah,
it's a badge. It's a real like cultural
it's a badge of
touchstone
honor
for us. Yeah, exactly. It's almost as much of a badge of honor of just like growing up knowing that your team was like the second fiddle team, and just like, and I mean, like, yes, 2004 was great. And like, yes, we've won the World Series like a handful of times since then. And I wouldn't trade that for anything, but I do kind of miss being the lovable losers.
Like, next year, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe this year, but...
There's a great book by the writer Rich Cohen, who is also, a little bit older than us, but he wrote a great book about the Chicago Cubs sort of curse, ending in 2016, and it talks about kind of the psychology of the lovable losers in the way in which that becomes a kind of comforting identity too, and I think it relates to baseball films too. The thing that we're actually here to talk about, I don't think you can find a great baseball film that's not an underdog story. Right. I think that would be, I would posit that. But so maybe want to make sure we're each going to do a recommendation. We'll probably chat about some other films. But quickly, Jason, what do you think makes a good baseball movie? Like, what do you look for in a baseball movie?
Well, I think you actually hit the nail on the head. The underdog story, when I kind of carry in my mind, I've had these discussions about your Mount Rushmore of baseball films. I certainly I've got like three, and then there's a fourth and fifth that's interchangeable. I think that's kind of thing. And for whatever reason, I think Americans still identify with this idea of underdoggedness, even though we're, not
globally,
not so much, right? But it's
although we might be again. We're working on it.
Give it time. We're trying to just bury this damn thing in the dirt, apparently. I do think there's the idea of like the lovable loser. People want to identify themselves with the guy, with the team, the guy, the men, the women, whomever. Right? League of the Road is a really terrific baseball. Not in my top 4, right? But that's not it. But it's really, really good still, right? People want to identify themselves with. I've been through the crap, and then I can come through and win, right? Which isn't exactly what happens. The reason why I hate Major League 2. But we'll get to that in a second. So there's definitely that. I think the sense of the past. I also think baseball films, more than the other sports films, deliver upon this sense of innocence. That innocence is often taken away. The Natural does this really, really well.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So and Sandlot revels in it, right? So innocence is really an important part. And then, again, this idea of Americana and things like that. There are also a lot of problems with baseball. They tend to be super whitewashed. When we look at the history of baseball films and the stories that are being told, oftentimes baseball films are set in an era. Sometimes they are, set pieces or period pieces. And we have to think about the stories because baseball is, look, the demographics of baseball. This is not a singularly white sport anymore. I would guess it's maybe the only sport in the United States that is dominantly Latino or Hispanic population at this point, sports at this point in time, right?
I would certainly imagine you would probably have the highest Latino proportional representation compared to any other major American sport. I would guess.
That's what's so cool about baseball right now is that you've got right now the big thing is all these Japanese players are coming over and just killing it, right? In the 80s, it was Dominican guys, right? Andres Galarraga and stuff like that, or I remember Fernando Valenzuela coming in from Mexico,
Mexican,
right? So the cool thing about baseball is that it's like America. It kind of built on its own mythology. It's it's this mixing pot. You can have a guy whose last name is Herbert, or a guy whose last name is Rodriguez, or any number of things, right? And that's cool.
Well, I'm posting a link to rolladie.net so you can roll your D20 for initiative.
All right, I have rolled now.
What's your roll?
I am the lovable loser. I got 2.
Nat 20, baby.
Ooh, does that mean does that mean you have to go twice?
It's a critical hit. Does that mean
it's
that
a critical? Yeah, you do max damage and then you roll the die again, but you only get to add your damage modifier once.
Wait a second here.
What's your roll, Chris?
I got 15.
I got 1. Again, I rolled second. I rolled again. I got 1.
You got a marvelous.
This would be a great opening scene in a baseball film. Well, so I'm going to tell you then. So what we're going to go, Jesse, Chris, Jason, in terms of favorite baseball films, plus a couple of honorable mentions. And I think the way to do it would be to just give a 3 to 4 minute description of the film in case somebody hasn't seen it, So mine is actually, I watched a bunch in preparation for this. I haven't actually seen The Sandlot, Jason. I tried to watch it and I couldn't. I'd have to subscribe to something else, and I had too many subscriptions going right now for the budget reasons. But I found this film that was on some list that I'd never seen, and I watched it, and I loved it. And it is called, it's got a hard name to say, so I have to make sure I say it right so I don't sound like a moron. The full title is The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings. Have either of you seen this?
No.
Never heard of this.
Came out in 1976. Okay, check out the cast. The main character is played by Billy D. Williams. Ooh. It also has James Earl Jones, Richard Pryor, David Alan Grier, and it is about a black barnstorming baseball team. I want to say in just before integration and the color barrier is broken. And the plot is Billy D. Williams plays Bingo Long, who's kind of like Satchel Paige, great pitcher and kind of long in the tooth, a little bit old. Probably he looks like he's in his late 30s. he's the pitcher, he's the leader, and he and James Earl Jones' character, who's kind of like based on Cool Papa Bell, are both stars in the Negro Leagues, but they are not being paid enough. They hate their owners. And so Bingo Long pitches. I'm trying to remember what James Earl Jones' character's name, but he basically recruits a bunch of star players in the Negro Leagues, and they form their own independent team so they can make more money and pay themselves more money and not be in these terrible contracts. And so they start touring around in a couple of cars. They go into the South. They get frozen out. They're trying to play other black teams, but the black owners stop them from doing that. They basically don't like the competition, so they start playing all these white teams. And then it's mostly a comedy, but there are a bunch of black men showing up white men athletically in all sorts of places, rural places, in the South, in the North. And so there are these moments of tension where it gets a little bit dangerous.
Oh, no, Pico, not me. It ain't manly.
What difference does it make, Leon? We're gonna win anyway. Now, you folks another home out of here, them Okies are liable to get the tar and feathers.
I ain't gonna shine for no white folks, and that's that.
Well, you only gotta pretend, and they won't know we're pretending, so we just one up on them. Hey, come on, get a batter up there.
Billy D. Williams' character, Bingo Long, is starting to realize they're playing a white team. The crowd, a fight almost breaks out, and the crowd kind of turns against them and starts throwing trash and stuff, and you hear the N-word a few times, and it's getting kind of ugly. So he goes out on the mound and starts clowning.
All right, hold it, everybody. Relief pitcher coming in.
Get the hell out of that bingo. I told you I ain't playing along.
Oh, you just afraid I'm gonna whip you in front of all these folks. What the hell you think you're doing? Wait a minute, I just want to play a little gag on my friend over there. Now, you just give me the ball and I'll be a boy for the rest of your life, all right? What do you niggers think this is? Well, you know how niggas is.
Boy, I'm gonna whack that ball so far, they gotta hop on a train to catch it.
Oh, I warn you, Leon. This one gonna be a smoother. Happy 4th of July from the Bingo Long Traveling All Stars and Motor Kids.
He's evoking the stereotypes that white people have of black people that they find amusing in order to diffuse the situation. And it diffuses the situation, but it's also like, there's a real sadness there, right? You know, the way that he basically diffuses the situation is to kind of lean into a kind of racism, you know, sort of play to a stereotype. And I think it's the best performance I've ever seen Billy D. Williams give. And like, the movie got okay reviews. It was mostly kind of panned as a comedy. But I think it's really good. Like, the cast is really good. The acting is good. I think there are cringy moments, but I think they're supposed to be cringy because these characters are kind of doing a form of minstrelsy, you know, for the sake of getting across to their audience. And it's also interesting because they're sort of two forces of opposition. They're the black baseball owners who are trying to shut them out. And then they're also the white people. You know, often they're in segregated spaces, so, you know, there's danger on the road from time to time. And then, you know, Richard Pryor's character has kind of an interesting gimmick. He keeps trying out different identities other than African American, hoping that he'll be treated better. So he you know, and he's, you know, Richard Pryor is kind of light skinned, so he kind of like grows a mustache and slicks his hair back and starts speaking with kind of like a Latin American accent, you know, claiming to be sort of like Dominican. And then at another point he tries to be indigenous, Native American, you know, and it's, you know, it's uncomfortable, but it's I think the film is kind of supposed to be uncomfortable, and I think a lot of people in the 70s didn't quite pick up on the subtext there. So that is my choice. I recommend it. There's definitely some painful moments, but I just think like it blew me away when I saw it. But my honorable mentions I'm going to give you are The Natural, which is it's one of the very first films I ever saw in a theater, and I still cry when Roy Hobbs hits the lights out. And it's magical, and I think it summons what you were saying earlier, Jason, about kind of the innocence of a baseball fan, particularly as a kid, particularly before the steroid era, and that sort of sense that anything can happen. It really just it captures that. And there's a lot of interesting myth making in that film about like purity and family and stuff. And then my other honorable mention is Major League, not two but one, which is a goofy ass film, but there's some really great moments, and there's a scene. I don't know if you'll remember the scene where Tom Berenger's character, the catcher, goes to Rene Rousseau's boyfriend's
You're still in the movie,
apartment.
Jesse.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I will. Then I'm going to back off.
Nice.
But I think you know the scene I'm talking about.
Quick's coughing.
Right. Yes. Because she's a librarian, and she tested him. Yeah, well, then I'm not going to talk about that scene. So if that comes up later in our conversation, I want to marvel at the subtext of that particular scene. But I'm done. But my recommendation again was the Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars in Motor Kings, which I had never seen until I was prepping for this podcast, and I'm so glad I did.
Nice. All right, I rolled a 15. I'm going to go next. I am also going to say The Natural is my honorable mention for the same reasons Jesse did. All three of us are just a few years apart in age, and I think that, as like boys playing baseball who are growing up in the 80s, like The Natural is going to be hard for us to have just missed some way. But I'm going to pander to my background, and I'm going to select Fever Pitch, which is which is not an amazing movie, except for the fact that it was written as a soccer book. It's a football book. It's about the original book. Fever Pitch is about Arsenal Football Club. I'm a big soccer player. Played in college. Still love the game completely. And the reason why Fever Pitch
you got
works,
you got to tell us your team first before your club.
My team is, if I were you, I'm pretty sure you're going to say Manchester United because clearly you're a mercenary person.
That's right. Manchester, baby. My ancestors are from Manchester. I'm also what they refer to as a winner. So,
except that your team got their asses kicked in the Manchester Derby on Sunday.
You know what? It's like a baseball film in a lot of ways. It's coming back. It's about, it's also Rocky. It's not how many times that you get knocked down. Sometimes you have to get back up. So, there's that.
One of my favorite things about Manchester United over the past 15 years is that we've discovered that really it was just Alex Ferguson. And other than that, it is an organization in horrible disarray, and it is so much fun to watch. I am a Crystal Palace fan. Right. I adore mid-table mediocrity, and I would rather enjoy my team not getting relegated rather than ever being anywhere close to the European spots.
Are we going to have time to come back and talk about what Ryan Reynolds has done to soccer in the United States?
Oh my goodness. Wow. What a thing.
A Canadian will save us.
Yes.
I think maybe it's another maybe soccer movies is our reunification. Well, Fever Pitch, the movie. I haven't seen it. Give us a quick.
It's fine. It's totally. It's one of those movies that is made for just one population, and that is a population of Red Sox fans who would like to just re-experience the 2004 glory. And what was so cool about the movie is they were like, well, we're going to lose, so that's fine. And they actually, had to reshoot the movie because of what happened in real life. They had to rewrite the script and change everything. Jimmy Fallon at his most sort of late night existence, sort of just a young comic actor, and Drew Barrymore with just some wonderful onstage chemistry, and it really captures the just frantic joy of that bizarre American League Championship Series. That there was just no chance that we were going to win. It had never happened before. And it's one of the reasons why sport is so wonderful, because eventually this has never happened before happens. It's like evolution. Eventually, you end up with an upright creature. And that is, so I think Fever Pitch is great, but it is great for a very constrained population of watchers. And it's a fun movie, you know. It's like embedded in the plot are also some like really odd artifacts of like early aughts kind of dating, as you watch Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore sort of try to date each other.
No, really, I appreciate you being cool about the phone thing, because I once went on a date with this guy who got so angry I was on the phone that he grabbed it out of my hand and he threw it in the fish tank.
I would never do that.
What are your pet peeves? What stresses you out? And I'm only asking because, frankly, the men I meet are highly... Holy son of a...
I got it.
Stop
Let me do it.
ringing!
Let me do it. Hello? No, she hasn't. May I take a message? This is Ben. I'm her houseboy / sex slave. Okay. You betcha. Bye-bye. Call your mother.
You know what? Fever Pitch is the perfect movie if you are a fan of baseball and you want to get your partner into baseball. That's the movie that can do that. So it's a really good one to like forge a connection with a close friend or a partner to bring them into the sport that we all love.
And so if I'm gathering right, so it's set during the ALCS playoffs in 2004, which, if I remember, the Red Sox came back from like a pretty deep hole.
Three games down. It's never happened before.
First time ever happened.
Yeah. Yeah,
and was that with the Yankees? Were the Yankees the other team?
Yeah, it was the...
So that's when I saw my favorite play ever, which I talked about in another episode of Hideki Matsui playing a ball like he was going to catch it that hit off the green monster so that he could hold the runner on second. It was like the most
It was a brilliant moment. It was so incredible. Yeah. Like because he makes all of those computations in like the time that the ball leaves the bat but doesn't leave the infield. And it's like those kinds of like professional competencies that make baseball so amazing, because like honestly you shouldn't be able to do any of the things that those guys do, but they do them.
Yeah. Hit a fastball?
Yeah, no way.
Or hit a slider? Even hit a slow curve, like a 12-6 curve. It's amazing.
They say that hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in any sport. I mean, it's just like it's ridiculously hard. If anything, Pedro Serrano from my film, Major League, will tell us is that you can't hit curveball. It's like
that's right.
At all. You tell me Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball? Oh God, what a great movie that is! I do want to come back for a second and talk about Fever Pitch. I feel like that's a movie. Like if you're an alien in another like spaceship and you're coming to Earth, it is the way to convince your friend alien to go ahead and annihilate the entire planet, because nothing good happens in Fever Pitch. Most especially Jimmy Fallon is the worst thing in Band of Brothers. Right? You're watching like 10 episodes of Glory about Easy Company, and here comes Jimmy Fallon and his stupid face showing up in a Jeep to give orders for 15 seconds, and you can't take your eyes off of that.
And he basically plays Jimmy Fallon, right? Like it's just like, hey, it's Jimmy Fallon. I'm here with some ammo.
Yeah, and that's why he's perfect in Fever Pitch. He's sort of this Muppet-faced goofball, and again, that's like it's what
haven't seen it.
No. It's what helps make the movie into what it is, and what it is not is a great movie, but it is perfect at what it is trying to do, which is sort of like a very odd fictional documentary whose audience is really only Boston fans.
Now, this is like seeing like Katharine Hepburn with like a young Nick Nolte or something like that, because instead of Spencer Tracy, because Drew Barrymore should only be with Adam Sandler. This has been established. This is gospel. You can't. No, absolutely not.
One thing that would have improved Fever Pitch is if Adam Sandler had played the male role. That would have been
absolutely
amazing.
Or Nick Nolte.
Nick Nolte from Warrior.
Red Sox might be able to do it this year.
Oh my God! Here's your Nick Nolte baseball thing, right? Because if you guys seen Warrior, at the very end of the film, When Tom Hardy, oh my God, you guys gotta watch it. He's amazing. But he's like the drunk father, and he's quoting Old Man in the Sea to Tom Hardy because he's having a complete, it's just, oh my God. Watch Warrior, and then have yourself a good cry at the very end as a man. Because I can't make it through the end of the film without crying. Like, I've seen the movie like 6 times. It's like therapy, only you get to watch guys hit each other. So,
he's having a good he's having a good final act, I think. Like
Nolte? Nolte was always a great actor.
Sure.
His demons just got a hold of him.
Yeah, but he kind of dropped out for he went to jail a few times, and then when he seems to have popped up and he's all weathered and stuff, but he's still got the chops. Like,
you may remember he was people's like sexiest man of the year in like 1997 or something like that. You'd have to look it up, but like they chose Nick Nolte. Nick Nolte was cast opposite Julia Roberts in a film called it's like I See Trouble or something like that. No, it was like it was awful. It was one of the worst. Julia Roberts and Nick Nolte. No, it's not gonna work. So
I feel like he had all of his aging in like 2 years. It's like he's going along, still pretty handsome, and
6 packs a day, and all drinking straight vodka probably does it. I mean, look at Gary Busey. Remember when Gary Busey was scary? Remember when he was Mr. Joshua in Lethal Weapon, and we thought he could go toe to toe with Mel Gibson, like pre-crazy Mel Gibson, or we knew he was crazy Mel Gibson.
He just knew a few more leg locks, he would have won that fight. Too.
That's good.
Mel Gibson just beats him with the leg locks.
Underrated Christmas movie. We always talk about Die Hard. Lethal Weapon, also a Christmas movie. That's great. All right, go back. My movie. Jesse talked about it briefly, and I hope we have a chance to talk about The Natural here in a bit, because I think that scene that we're talking about is super important. I'll give you the movie so we can stay somewhat on track, although this fucking train left the station a long time ago. For me, it's Major League. I want to give it to you my dark horse, and we'll talk about some of the other ones here in a bit. Moneyball. I think it's Brad Pitt's best acting performance.
I think it's the last great baseball film also that has come out.
It reminds me a lot of The Social Network in the way its tone and feel, the way it's put together. It's endlessly, like The Social Network, it's endlessly rewatchable. Chris Pratt's really good in that movie.
He is.
As well. It's a very
and Chris
film.
Pratt makes it kind of an underdog film too, as well as Brad Pitt, but also you get that same like ragtag underdogs thing, except for now there's the whole Moneyball conceit holding them together. So it's not
that
just
scene
luck.
when they're sitting there in his living room, it's like playing first base isn't hard. Tell him, Wash, it's very hard. Well, what we're doing isn't, No, it's great. I love that film. You find yourself rooting for that team, rooting for Pitt. Yet, Jonah Hill is spectacular. I think that was where we started to really get a sense that Hill really had real chops. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. He's really good in that. Okay, so my film, though, is Major League. And I could have chosen, I thought of there's a whole number of Kevin Costner films we can talk about. I think the Costner trilogy is important to talk about when it comes to baseball. But for me, it's Major League. I grew up watching this film. This has got your classic, like you're saying, it's really the Bad News Bears of the late 80s. Comes out in 89.
For grown-ups.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And because there are going to be people here screaming at their hosts, Bad News Bears, like just easy.
Right. We hear you. Yeah.
We know.
Yep.
We know.
Yep.
They're there. We recognize your childhood. That'll be us screaming Sandlot in a few years. But Major League's awfully prescient. It's dealing with all of this kind of stuff. The purpose, like sinking a team, trying to get to Florida. There was no team in Florida. In fact, if you go to Miami, there's really not a team there now. So essentially what happens is the owner inherits the team from her late husband and essentially comes up with a clause in Cleveland, which was at the time, really that city with the chip on its shoulder. Like, we're never going to win. Right, Cleveland, Minneapolis is kind of taking that on in some ways now, but Minneapolis is kind of cool. Cleveland just has this like working class ethos of we're workers, but we're never going to get over, And so you get this thing, and she purposely tries to put together a team that fails, of a bunch of never has-beens or guys who have passed their prime or never will be again or anything like that. Starring Charlie Sheen as a guy from the California Penal League. Tom Berenger is a guy way past his prime. He was really the heart of the film in a lot of ways. Dennis Haysbert. We get to see a young Wesley Snipes. This film it's got a lot of those guys, if you will. And of course, who's the bad guy? It's the Yankees. The Yankees are often the bad guys in these movies, right? It's even in the 89 when the Yankees were not good in the late 80s. It was still like the idea of them. In fact, Clue Haywood looks like a big fat version of Don Mattingly.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It's like if you pumped up Don Mattingly with a pump, right? And he's got the mustache, but it's like a little
great
more walrusy.
mustache. Yeah.
The one-liners in that movie. How's your wife and my kids? Just like oh god. Some of those things are so funny. The way they come together, and of course, the love story. This is actually a very good love story between Tom Berenger and Rene Russo, the librarian. We can break that scene down. It's actually a very tender, sweet thing where he's trying to woo back the love of his life that he screwed up that relationship. She's about to get married to some other dude who's really not for her, and he's like, come back and take a chance with me. I remember first seeing it like when it first came out, so I didn't see it at the theater. I would have been 12, right? But you see it was on TV all the time. So I grew up watching this film. I'm 13 years old at this point in time, somewhere in that range. And watching it just, of course, the comeback is the montages as they start to realize we're going to put this team together. We're going to put all the crap aside. Charlie Sheen getting the glasses, and all of a sudden he can pitch. And let's not forget, this movie comes out in 89, right? This movie is 3 years removed from Charlie Sheen and Tom Berenger shooting at each other in Platoon. And yet, their chemistry is outstanding in this film. You forget that they're actually in Platoon together because they work so well as like a mentor-mentee kind of relationship, right?
And Berenger's like the scary heavy in Platoon who
he's the bad guy.
He's out for blood, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we can talk about Platoon and some other time. It's they play baseball, but and of course at the very end, I'm not going to spoil a movie that is 35 years old now. It comes out the same year as Roadhouse, but when they finally come back,
it feels like Roadhouse came out in like the 1500s. Like it seriously feels like it's been around for half a millennium.
God, I love Roadhouse so much. I mean, again, another film that is endlessly one-lineable. One of the stars of that film, the guy who plays Jimmy, Marshall Teague, has become a kind of friend of mine via Twitter. So he's actually the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Mm-hmm. He's such a sweetheart. I've asked him to live tweet us when we did the Roadhouse thing on HATM one night. He's like, yeah. He's like, I'll be at a wedding. I'll tweet from the stand. I was like, you don't have to do that. He's like, I got you. Jimmy, who's said he liked to F guys like that in prison. So that was nice. That's a hell of a most famous line to be famous for. Anyway, long story. Major League has that very much that story of downbeat, downtrodden losers, but we're going to get things together. We're going to come back. You've got some sports montages. We've got to talk about the importance of a montage. And ultimately to come back to defeat the hated Yankees. That whole bunting scene at the very end where he fakes calling his shot, and they end up winning. It's such the last bit.
Basically, uses the last remaining ligament of his 38-year-old catcher knees, right, to run out the bunt too in slow motion too. Don't we even hear when he gets on to first? Do we even hear them kind of crumple in slow motion?
Oh well,
I just remember Tom Berenger's face in agony when he touches the bag like a split second ahead of the throw to first.
So he's like 35, which means he's 11 years younger than I am right now. And that shit pisses me off, right? Because all these guys who are like
catchers age quickly, though. Keep that in mind,
Yeah, unless you're from Detroit, playing in Detroit, and all of a sudden in 1998 you get twice the size that you used to be. But we don't have to talk about syringes right now. Punch Rodriguez, man. Arguably best catcher ever, and then like these guys, they got so high. These guys didn't need steroids. It's
such a shame.
Bonds
it's so
could
sad.
have been the greatest player of all time, unquestionably.
And like Ken Griffey Jr., who didn't juice, and if you look at like his statistics are amazing, but they were not impressive compared to McGuire and Bonds and Sosa too. So
Most beautiful swing in baseball history. I was
Yep,
watching a montage
absolutely.
of him swinging the baseball. You hit on that, Jesse. Like, I watched a montage the other day of like baseball films. Did you see this going around Twitter the other day?
No.
There's like this really cool. I'll have to send it to you guys. It's like this incredibly cool montage of baseball movies about what they mean. And then you've got the national music. These movies often have like the best music that just summons something inside of you. So,
Major League was Randy Newman was the composer.
Yeah.
Too. Yep.
Yeah, I mean Randy Newman's doing that, right? Toy Story, but Major League it's weird because when we think about like the great baseball films, they're often kind of serious or have this aspect. But you talk to anybody who likes baseball and baseball movies, Major League is always on that top 4 or 5 list. And for me, I think it's probably number 1, which feels weird to say. But as I was kind of debating what my list was, it includes The Natural and it includes some other films. And Moneyball was certainly one of those conversations. I think I had to go with Major League. And it felt weird, but it just feels right. So I'm going to go with Major League.
One thing Jesse and I talk about a bunch is that like some advice that I got a long time ago writing wise is that you should never write anything that's not a little bit funny. And I think that that's one of the joys of Major League is that like it is a movie that takes you away emotionally, but it is still very funny. Like I think it's comedy first and then manages to sort of steal your heart on the way to its climax. It's a very well-made movie.
I will also say, Jason, I really like your pick, and I watched them both recently, and Major League is very similar in certain respects to Bull Durham, and it came out a year after Bull Durham, so in a way it's kind of like Hollywood. Bull Durham was almost like an independent film. It was on Orion or something like that. And so it's kind of like Hollywood being like, oh, let's make another kind of old catcher funny movie with sex and stuff like that. But I think Major League is better than Bull Durham. I watch Bull Durham and like I feel like as nerds and hipsters we're sort of supposed to like Bull Durham because it's got like, but it just feels like it's trying to be a kind of writerly baseball movie to me in a way, whereas Major League is just trying to entertain you, and it does a great job of that. And then I was alluding earlier to that scene. You mentioned it too, where Tom Berenger's character, I can't remember his name, but he goes to Rene Russo's boyfriend's apartment and the boyfriend invites him in and there's all this subtext, right? Like they're pretending to be polite to each other and
they're trying to show him up.
They're trying to show him up and there's also 2 guests there. And the guests are sort of piecing the whole relationship together through these little cues. It's like John Ford, like if you watch the John Ford Westerns where like the characters would all be in the room and nobody's really saying what they mean. It's all subtext, but you get it.
I've heard baseball players make very good salaries these days.
Well, that depends on how good they are, I guess.
How good are you?
I make the league minimum.
He was one of the best in baseball before he had problems with his knees.
Well, Jake, what are you going to do when your career's over? I mean, you can't play baseball forever, can you?
Something will come up.
Will it?
I love that scene. Maybe it's because I watched that movie first, but I also think that, like, it's not that Bull Durham's bad. Bull Durham's fine, but I feel like Bull Durham is very much like, kind of like looking at you below the reading glasses, being like, wasn't that a clever line? Wasn't that pretty clever?
It's a bit self-aware.
It's self-aware, and Major League is perfectly matched to its ambition. It's exactly, it does exactly what it's trying to do, and it does it really, really well. And it's also like, I think also historically, my understanding is that was kind of the first movie where you started getting a lot of the insights that came out of that book Ball 4, which I haven't read. Have either of you read it? But it was a relief pitcher. I think he was a Yankees pitcher, right? Who he got injured pretty early in his career in his 20s. So then he's down and out, and he writes this book and he tells it like it is. Like, what's life on the road like? Cocaine, strippers, swearing, pranks, and nobody had really, like, the sports writers all knew that stuff, but they didn't. They respected the locker room. Nobody had really broken the spell of kind of like the clean-cut American hero baseball player until Ball 4. And so to me, I feel like Major League is kind of one of the sort of first real like post Ball 4 movies too, where it's like, no, it's raunchy back there. We're talking about a bunch of men in their 20s, and they're going to behave poorly in a way that can be bad, but also kind of hilarious and fun.
Can I give you a movie that like isn't a baseball film but uses baseball as its backdrop?
Sure.
Ooh, this was kind of one of my questions. Is like, at what point does a movie become a baseball movie? I can't wait to hear this.
Brewster's Millions. Do you remember this film?
With
Richard Pryor.
Richard Pryor?
Yeah, Richard Pryor. I want to say it's is it John Candy is the co-star on this? It's been so
I feel like it always in my brain merges with Trading Places,
yeah.
But right, isn't Brewster's, and there's also The Toy from around the same era.
Yeah. So yeah, basically the idea is that they are minor league baseball players for I don't even remember who the team was. It was whoever. And Brewster ends up inheriting all this money from like this wealthy uncle and has to spend it all so that he could get this other. So, again, the idea is like they're losers because they're on these minor league teams. They're never going to do anything. It's not a baseball film because baseball has to be. It's like the idea of what a Christmas movie. Christmas has to be central to the plot. It can't just take place on Christmas, right? How is Christmas driving the plot? Which is the reason why Die Hard is a Christmas movie. But in order for it to be a baseball movie, Chris, I think baseball has to be integral to the plot. It has to inform the identities. These guys are baseball players, and being a baseball player informs who they are. Sure. The actions they make, the things they do. These guys, say in Major League, are just trying to stick around for one last shot at the game. There's that great scene in Moneyball when Brad Pitt is talking to Gary, but he's talking to the guy. He's like, "Look, let's be real here. It's like you're just trying to stay in the game. You're trying to stay in the league, and I'm just trying to get every last bit out of it." Yeah, Dave Justice. Thank you. I'm sorry. Right. Yeah.
Where Dave Justice is trying to be high and mighty because he's got a $30 million contract, and Pitt, as Billy Bean, has to explain, like, actually, the Yankees paid me to take you off their hands.
They're paying me to play against them. Yeah, exactly. So let's just be real here, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the centrality. It's like baseball has to be central to who it can't just be baseball is there. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah. So here's a question then. Did any of you have the experience a few years ago? For me, everybody is like tweeting about Ted Lasso, and I finally got Apple Plus and like started watching, and I'm like, why is this so familiar? And then at a certain point, I'm just like, it's fucking Major League. It's just fucking Major League in England with soccer. I mean, like, did you have that experience too of like realizing? And also, like, I recently watched 8 Men Out, which is a pretty good movie too, John Sayles. But also there is a kind of similar plot in The Natural and that Bingo Long movie that I was mentioning earlier too, of the owners against the players and the owner trying to lose. That does seem to be one of the themes that kind of comes up in baseball movies from time to time too. And then Apple TV and the Ted Lasso producers, with all compliments to them, steal from the best, ripped it off and put it in a new, fresh context brilliantly.
Doesn't that get into the class aspect of that, though? The idea that people are identifying themselves as working class, and here they are just trying to make it. And who's holding them down? The wealthy elites who are actually undermining everything that they're trying to work for. I mean, that's at the heart of this idea. It's a class. These are class struggles.
And I think that's why baseball movies are so. That's why they're so integral to. It's why I think they hit so well with American audiences, because of that sort of like working class sense that we have about ourselves as a country, which may or may not be true, but set against some sort of evil empire, like owner type.
It's very explicit in 8 Men Out too, which is directed by John Sayles, who is like Red Diaper Baby, right? Like super, very explicit leftist. He made Matewan, that strike film that's really, really good too. He lays it on very thick, but it does seem to be a theme. I guess Jason, like, also as the professional historian here, as the PhD, I was a history major, and I've done a lot of journalism around history too. When you guys were talking in a recent podcast about William Cronin, I was like, yes, my God! Which is like the book, his book explains Chicago. So anyway, I'm a low-key history guy, but, do you see what in these films we've talked about? You just mentioned something about class, but like as a historian, what are you seeing in baseball films, in any of these baseball films, or any of the ones we haven't talked about?
I see in these films the power of memory in shaping identity, right? That's the nostalgia and memory are a hell of a drug. And that's the reason why Sandlot plays this to a T, where it talks about the beast, right? And their own fears. And of course, when they finally get to go see James Earl Jones, who has now been in 3 films that have been mentioned in this thing, or actually has not been mentioned in one of the other films, which we've got to talk about, Field of Dreams.
Field of Dreams.
But I see the idea of memory and this idea of thinking back at the past, and why we continue to look back at baseball films as these artifacts. I look at them and actually say, why are baseball movies? So baseball is not the most popular sport in the United States. Yeah. Far and away the most popular sport movie in the United States.
Interesting.
Why is that? I think it's just the idea of memory and identity. I think that's actually, I'm far more interested in the meta aspect of this, which is like, why do people continue to go back to watch Kevin Costner pitch, or use this as a mechanism to get to know his father, or anything else? So that's actually kind of the thing that I'm interested in, is like why people continue to go back to baseball versus we don't have many football movies. I mean, we got a few football movies, right?
Yeah.
But we don't talk about football movies in the same way we talk about baseball movies. We don't talk about I mean, there are certain basketball movies that shall not be named here in my presence that are set in Indiana that I will not acknowledge the presence of. It's the only movie actually banned from HATM because it's set in Indiana.
Haven't seen that one. I know the one you're talking about.
Neither will I, ever. But baseball movies, I think for some reason have this hold on the collective imagination of American audiences. And I don't know that they're actually popular outside the United States. These seems to be kind of a uniquely, maybe in Japan where there's, and we've seen a few films like, I want to say Mr. Baseball, I think was the one where Tom Selleck goes to Japan. And there have been a few, I think I'd like to see what Japanese cinema has to say about baseball. I think
you hit on, totally, and you hit on something I think really important, and one of the things I'm wondering is like, did the three of us, we're about the same age, do we come in kind of like the last gasp of the American baseball era and the American baseball film era? And one of the things you mentioned earlier is that baseball's way more diverse than it used to be. I mean, the color barrier was broken in the late 1940s, but then you also have the influx of Latin Americans and Japanese and probably others too that I'm not thinking of. But part of the reason is that baseball was really popular in other places for a long time. Baseball was huge in Latin America, and there's some great books about that. Baseball's huge in Japan. I'm reading a book about that right now that kind of does the history of baseball in Japan from a journalist perspective. It's all right. It's not as deep as I would like it to be. And I was kind of on social media the other day. I was looking for anthologies of baseball writing, and there are a lot of them. And the last really great one I could find came out in like 1998. And a lot of the writing is stuff from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. And the last really great piece of writing in it was Stephen King's essay from like 1994 about his son's Little League team in Maine, which is great. It's great. But I'm like, it's been 30 years. And baseball, there's been a lot of baseball in those 30 years. And amazing things have happened. And, I mentioned that Rich Cohen book about the Cubs. But I just wonder, like, I don't know that this current era, with the exception of Moneyball, this current era has been particularly well documented. Whatever, sort of the post-steroid, post-diversity, I don't know what you'd call this era, but I feel like they're probably, I don't know, do you guys think there will be more great baseball films? And will they feel fresh and new and not necessarily play in nostalgia so much, but speak to us about, like, what the world is like now?
I don't know. There was an attempt. Clint Eastwood made a film, Trouble with the Curve. right? A few years ago. And Clint Eastwood is kind of famous. Neither did I, right? I've seen clips of it on like TikTok, and I think that hits at the point, right? The films feel tired for some reason. I don't know. I don't know that there's a good explanation for this, why baseball isn't like holding on to it. But so baseball film scene kind of tied to certain actors as well. The first guy I think of is Costner, right? Because he's been done. Costner's such a great athlete in films. He sells that stuff. I'm waiting for the Costner bowling epic set in Wichita. Where he's got to lead Wichita State Shockers college bowling team back into stardom.
He'll have to fight with Woody Harrelson for that role. Our great bowling actor of that generation.
Yeah, we'll do a bowling thing next, right? I don't have a good answer.
Or John Turturro, right? Like the greatest bowling actor ever. Right?
So bad. I don't know. I don't know why we haven't seen those things. We've largely been caught up in the comic thing for a while. We're starting to see more influx from global producers. Like Godzilla -1 last year was the most spellbinding film I watched last year. I thought
didn't see it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Hollywood goes in. They go in phases, and they like nothing more than a sure thing, right? Which is why we're seeing all the comic book movies. Which
that's why we're seeing all the westerns right now.
Yes,
we're seeing the revitalization of the western right now.
Right, and I to me the Marvel movies were like, okay, these are our westerns, right? Like if in the 1950s and 60s when they made a gazillion westerns because they knew people, put a few famous actors in them, put some Six Guns in, write a decent plot, people will go to watch it. That's kind of what the Marvel movies are now. But yeah, now we have this kind of like neo-western thing going on too. Some of which is quite good,
Yeah.
Jason, do you think, I mean, like the idea that pops into my mind is that it's another symptom of kind of the loss of the monoculture? Like, our generation was sort of the last one that like lived through this idea of a monoculture because like cable existed, but not to the sort of fracturing degree of the internet. And when the three of us were growing up, like baseball was just on. It was on TV. Like if it was the weekend or something, it was like that. You're probably going to see the Sox playing. I know that pretty much every evening drive that I went on from April until September, I'm listening. My dad is listening to the Sox game on the radio on 880 or 1440, and that's gone. Like that monoculture is gone with the fracturing of the internet and TV. And I wonder if it's taken things. I wonder if it's just. There's just less baseball seeping out into children's lives. And I wonder if that's part of it. I'm not sure, but like I think Jesse's point that Marvel is sort of our monoculture at the moment is pretty accurate. So that's sort of my guess is where we've lost that.
There's other stuff, man. Yeah. I mean, I think really at the heart of what you're asking is, are the millennials and Generation Z the worst thing that ever happened to the galaxy? Yes. Obviously,
yes.
like any other generation, I shall blame the generations that come after, and the generations that came before. Boomers.
I was going to say, come on, let's give some of the credit where it's due.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm really I'm not cool enough to be a Gen X. I'm really Zennial. Is my sweet spot. No, I think you're absolutely hitting on right. There's more stuff. It's the reason why MASH had such high ratings because there were 4 channels. It's not a decline in the quality of baseball or the stories being told. It's just that we're open to other stories. And that's the sign of a shrinking world. And in fact, that's a good thing, right? That we can look at other stories coming from other filmmakers, from other vantages, baseball stories are going to come back around. We've already seen this. That's a pattern we've seen. People are going to continue to come back to these things. I'm not worried about baseball stories. And I haven't really gone, man, I wish somebody would tell the Yankees as a good guy. The last time that happened was, prior to the Yankees. The movie already died. That was terrible. So
maybe,
and they were the bad guy in For Love of the Game as well, by the way.
Oh, I've forgotten about that. Yeah, which is a pretty good movie too.
I actually like it. I think it's better. I think it's better Bull Durham.
I agree. Well, one observation, we've been talking about The Natural and dancing around, and I watched that again recently too. And one of the things that is so clear, the basic story, you have Roy Hobbs, he's this talent, his dad infuses him with his love of baseball, like on the field, wherever they are. Could be Iowa, could be Nebraska. It's somewhere Midwestern. They're throwing the ball together. His dad has a heart attack and dies. He's buried under a tree. Lightning strikes the tree, and Roy makes the bat from the wood that was,
it's like Spider-Man. It's like the plot of Spider-Man.
At all.
It's like Excalibur, man. It's like Beowulf. Yeah. Like he forges his own sword. It's like Luke Skywalker finally making his own lightsaber, and so then the source of his strength is his love of his father, his love of the game. He gets seduced by and his weaknesses are like greed and lust. He's seduced, he's shot, it takes him years to recover. He comes back, he's probably like 40, but he still has that love, so he gets his shot, and he's a great baseball player again. Things are going great, and then he gets seduced again by a woman who is working with, like, the people who are trying to fix the game, the people who are trying to screw the ball players and lose. He is briefly seduced, literally, but also kind of swayed by them. But then he meets Glenn Close, who dresses in all white. Turns out he has a son. His love for her, his love for the son inspires him and saves him, and he regains his strength and power at the last minute and, wins the game. And like I said, I cry every time. But I also wonder if that kind of story, like, does it just feel too, the fact that we all probably saw that when we were like 8 or 9, and it was a little bit more of a nostalgic era. Like, maybe, are we too sophisticated for that kind of baseball story anymore?
I find, as much as I love The Natural, for it to be utterly unbelievable. And here's why. Because nobody's turning down 28-year-old Kim Basinger. I'm sorry, it's just not happening. It's not happening. Listen, I will burn down the stadium. No, absolutely not.
Exactly. That's nobody would believe it because somehow it's believable. That decision is, and you're kind of like, come on, what's he doing with her? He's got to go with Glenn Close, the mother of his child who he doesn't even know about.
There's an odyssey to Roy Hobbs. His story. He's really having to overcome so much of this kind of stuff. I think you can really play around with some of this stuff. I mean, and I think a lot of us, I think that the natural strongest point is a lot of us feeling like at times, had I made a different decision, how would things have turned out? And if I could only go back and revisit that and get one more shot. And the thing about that is that he does. And it goes the way we want it to.
Yeah.
That says to me that there still is room for a great baseball movie because that's a story that we're going to keep wanting to be told.
Because the structure of baseball gives us that story because like it is a progression. Like, you get 27 outs, and it just keeps moving forward. And so it does really fit that kind of like what you're talking about nostalgia and getting another chance. And we so rarely do in life. And I think, that's probably why The Natural speaks to us because like we don't want the end of Gatsby. We want to fix the problem. And that's what we get to do with The Natural.
And The Natural has, inarguably, in my mind, the single greatest scene in baseball history. We've been talking about it all night. The home run is the music, the scene, the going around with the lights as they come down. We can feel it. We can feel that music in our bones right now as we think about it. It is the single best. Might be the single best thing in any. I mean, you could stack it up there with the single best scene in any sports film. It's that good. It's good.
Well, it's actually a pretty brilliant setup for my trivia, and I think we should do that now together.
Oh God,
I'm really proud of this trivia now, given all the things that we've talked about. It's as though I planned it this way. Okay, so which of these alternate endings, and here's what we'll do. I'll ask the question, and then each of you chat me what you think the answer is using the Zoom chat, so you can't see each other. Which of these alternate endings was originally written into the script, the screenplay, for a baseball movie and then scrapped because test audiences responded poorly. A, in Major League, Rachel Phelps, the villainous owner of the Cleveland Indians, turns out to really have been trying to encourage the team to win all along using various reverse psychology, including only pretending that she was trying to get them to lose so she would have an excuse to move to Miami, when in fact she really wanted them to win. So that's A. Rachel Phelps actually cared about the team. B, in The Natural, Roy Hobbs does not hit a game-winning home run and in fact strikes out, ending his dreams to become a baseball player and ruining Pop, the father figure manager whose stake in the team depended on them winning the pennant. Or C, in Bull Durham, after Crash Davis has his affair with Annie, played by Susan Sarandon, Crash gets a call from the Atlanta Braves and goes to the big leagues because Nuke LaLoosh, played by Tim Robbins, wants him as his personal catcher, demands him as his personal catcher. You guys need either the question or the three choices A, B, and C again?
I'm sending you my choice right now.
Okay. All right. I've got a choice from both of you. All right. Should I tell you who guessed what first, or should I give you the answer first?
You just hit us with the answer. We'll react accordingly.
Okay. The answer is A. In Major League, Rachel Phelps, the villainous owner of the Cleveland Indians. The original script was that it was all a put on, and that she actually cared about the team, and she was doing all of those things to inspire them to be the great players that she knew in her heart that they could be if only they had a common enemy to bond against.
She was such a great villainess too.
Yeah.
She was so... Yeah. You could really got to hate her in that movie. It was great.
Yeah, and they scrapped that, and they made her, in fact, the bad guy. But essentially, of course, that ends up being Rebecca in Ted Lasso's sort
of... yeah, same arc, thing. Same arcs. What did you guess, Jason? What was your pick?
I went with B, but you know, I went with the natural. You know,
I went with C. I went with C because I was like, you know, that's got that kind of 80s, this isn't the ending we thought, but it's still a positive ending for the protagonist kind of thing. So that's why I went with that.
Sort of Spinal Tap ending, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, you know, and it was a little bit of a trick question because in the novel by, what's his name, Bernard Malamud, who wrote that... I might have the name wrong, but in the Natural novel, Roy Hobbs does strike out at the end. But then I think it's Barry Levinson changed it for the film. They wanted a happy ending. And thus Jason got his very favorite movie scene ever.
Everyone got their favorite movie scene ever.
So Jason, I don't have trivia, but I have just one last follow-up question about the baseball world and baseball adjacent worlds. Are you familiar with the phenomenon that was Blazeball?
No, what is Blazeball?
So Blazeball centered on an absurdist simulation of baseball with fictional teams featuring random events such as the incineration of players by rogue umpires. Each player had a name and a star rating, which was used to determine their stats, as well as amusing trivia such as their preferred coffee type and their pregame rituals. After their first login, users could choose a favorite team and were given some coins that let you bet on the outcomes of these simulated games. I was just thinking about you and your background with film. I was like, I wonder if he has heard of Blazeball.
No, I gotta check this out.
It is over now. You can go to the Blazeball website. It ran for 3 years, and the leftover website is quite funny. It sort of summarizes what happened. But there were several seasons. They were all fictional, and like a lot of things on the internet, people got maybe a little too into it, and that is probably why it is no more. But go look up Blazeball. The Wikipedia page itself is quite entertaining.
Well. Jason, Chris, this was so much fun. I hope we find something else to talk about again. I'm really excited. We are going to put this out on opening day. I hadn't mentioned this to you, but if you wanted to co-publish, run it on your feed, you'd be very welcome to do that. I'd even be happy to share our edit. So you don't have to answer right now. You could think about it. Might not fit your thing, but thank you so much for joining us on Upper Middlebrow. This has been so much fun.
Man, that's awesome, guys. This was. I was looking forward to having this conversation.
And there's
good.
so many things we didn't talk about too, like Kentucky and a few. I mean, we could have talked about Florida some more. So maybe we'll do another one of these days.
We need to do a Florida Man podcast at some point, Tom Boy. Like, just explore Florida Man, like as a theme.
I think
I'm down.
We also need to do a Premier League episode. We need to do let's talk about football. Let's talk about European football. I think that we could definitely do
we'll
that.
Just flop around in our chairs. It'll be great. So
exactly.
Next time on Men in T-shirts.
Awesome.
Upper Middlebrow is a small point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are the veteran catchers hoping for one last shot at the dance. Thanks to Jason Herbert. It was so much fun. Check out his podcast, Historians at the Movies. Check out the hashtag HATM for movie screening times, where the community watches the films together. Jason, anything else people should check out while we're on a roll?
No, I think we're good, man. I think we covered everything else possible.
And if you are an employer in Florida, give them a job. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by Chris Bagg. You can learn more about us at uppermiddlebrow.com.
And as a reminder, everybody, Jesse and I are writers and editors. Maybe Jason is too, and maybe he can also help you with your writing, podcasting, editing, or historical project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. Check them out and get in touch if you want to talk about how we can help you. And everybody, thank you for listening. And Jason, thanks for coming on the show.
Call your shot and lay down the bunt.
This was a blast, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
You guys be good.
Talk to you later.
Bye.